They will regret hurting you and you won't say a word. They will regret hurting you and you won't say a word. They thought hurting you would break you. They assumed that by turning their back, betraying your trust, or diminishing your light, they had somehow won. But the greatest mistake they made was believing their power over you was permanent. What they could never comprehend is that your strength was never external, it was always internal. You did not fight back with bitterness, nor did you seek revenge with your hands. Instead, you went to the only place where true power resides, within. You understood a truth that escapes many. The world is not changed by reacting to it. It is changed by imagining beyond it. You refused to dwell in the past they tried to trap you in. You chose not to replay the hurt, not to cling to the narrative of the victim. You rewrote the script. In the quietness of your room, in the stillness of your heart, you revised the experience. You no longer saw yourself as rejected, you imagined yourself chosen. You didn't see abandonment, you saw divine protection, and this subtle, sacred shift in perception became the key that unlocked your transformation. You began to walk differently, speak differently, think differently. Not to impress them, not to prove anything, but because you finally saw yourself as who you were always meant to be, and that identity rooted in the divine image, grounded in spiritual truth, became your new foundation. You stopped apologizing for your light. You stopped shrinking to make others comfortable. You no longer participated in conversations that required you to belittle your worth. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it was unstoppable. Piece by piece, the false self fell away, the one wounded by their betrayal, the one desperate for approval, the one trying to explain pain to people who didn't care to understand. And in its place emerged a version of you that they never saw coming, because even you hadn't fully met this version of yourself yet. This kind of elevation isn't loud, it doesn't announce itself, it's not posted online or shouted in anger. It happens in secret, in divine partnership with the invisible forces that shape destiny. You didn't have to prove they were wrong, you simply became right with who you are, and that became your justice. Because what you become in silence speaks louder than any argument you could ever win. What you manifest by imagination cuts deeper than any insult they once hurled. You stopped attending the courtroom of public opinion because the higher court had already ruled in your favor. And the sentence wasn't their punishment, it was your promotion. You were never interested in vengeance. You only wanted peace. You weren't seeking to see them fall, you just wanted to rise. But in this world, there's a law deeper than human opinion. A law that ensures every seed planted returns a harvest, and when they planted deception, when they sowed dismissal, they didn't realize they were watering their own regret, not because you cursed them, but because your transformation becomes the echo that follows them. You never spoke a word, yet your growth became their guilt. Your peace became their punishment. Your new season became the evidence that the one they mistreated was always chosen, always favored, always backed by something higher than man. What they now witness is not just your healing, it is your unveiling. The version of you that had been buried under their opinions, under their limits, under their wounds, is now alive. You look in the mirror and see someone you respect. You wake up and feel guided by purpose. You walk into rooms and no longer carry the need to be accepted, because you've accepted yourself at the deepest level. That self-acceptance is magnetic, that wholeness is power, that stillness is sacred. And they feel it, even if they don't say it, even if they pretend they don't notice. Somewhere in their spirit they recognize what they lost, and that recognition burns. They might reach out, they might try to re-enter your life. Not because they've changed, but because your change disturbed them. They may apologize, or they may remain silent. Either way, it doesn't matter. You're not waiting for their words anymore. You're not chasing closure. You are the closure. You are the proof that God can take pain and make purpose, that rejection can become redirection, that isolation can become incubation for the miraculous. And as you walk deeper into this truth, you realize something profound. Their regret is not your responsibility. Their remorse is not your burden. You don't need to gloat, boast, or make them feel worse. You only need to live fully in the truth of your becoming. That is enough. In fact, that is everything. Because when you master your inner world, you master your destiny. And those who once hurt you, they become irrelevant to the plot. Not because you hate them, but because you've outgrown the story that included them. You no longer identify with the person they hurt, because that person no longer exists. You don't carry the same wounds, you don't rehearse the same thoughts, you don't dwell in the same place emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. They might remember you as fragile, but now you are fire. You are grace wrapped in thunder, you are calm backed by unspeakable authority, and you never had to raise your voice. This is the silent revenge of the spiritually awakened, not vengeance rooted in ego, but victory birthed from vision. You saw a new self in the midst of the storm, and you chose to become it. You didn't let the betrayal define you, you let it refine you. You didn't allow bitterness to take root, you watered the seeds of blessing. And now you're living in the harvest. Their regret is simply a natural consequence of the law. Their guilt is simply the echo of your elevation, and your silence, it remains the loudest message of all. You won't say a word because you don't need to. Your very existence, healed and whole, says it all. There is a spiritual law that governs the universe, not a law of man, but a divine principle that operates in stillness and certainty, the law of consciousness. This law knows no bias, no favoritism, no personal attachment. It simply mirrors to every soul the contents of their own inner world. What they hold in mind and heart, whether noble or cruel, will eventually take form in their external reality. This is why those who hurt you are not escaping anything. They may appear untouched, unbothered, and even triumphant on the surface, but underneath the illusion, the law is already at work. When they spoke lies, planted seeds of betrayal, or tried to diminish your worth, they were not just harming you, they were harming themselves. Every thought of disdain, every act of disrespect, every whisper of manipulation was an energy sent into the universe with their name written on it. And because the law is exact, precise, and without error, those energies must return multiplied, intensified, and wrapped in the very lessons they refuse to learn. But this truth, this divine balancing, does not require your participation. You are not the judge nor the jury. You are not the one who needs to expose, punish, or prove. Your only task is to rise into the awareness that everything is being handled by forces greater than human strategy. You don't need to speak on what they did, because the law already heard it. You don't need to make anyone pay, because the law always collects. You don't need to be bitter, because justice is not emotional, it is spiritual. Those who wronged you, whether intentionally or carelessly, were functioning from their own distorted assumptions. They assumed they could act without consequence. They assumed they could speak without accountability. But the law of consciousness does not forget. It does not delay forever. It gathers, it waits, and then it releases not for revenge, but for correction, reflection, and return. And while their harvest is growing quietly, your only assignment is to tend to yours. You don't need to obsess over how the law will operate. That is not your work. You turn inward. You revise your own assumptions. You forgive not because they deserve it, but because it frees your imagination from their prison. You bless not because you agree with their actions, but because you refuse to carry their darkness into your next season. You become the opposite of what they expected. You become radiant, focused, full of grace. You don't wait for karma, you align with the divine pattern and let your own elevation be your response. You step into the vibration of wholeness, knowing that wholeness cannot be touched by lies. You imagine yourself above it all because spiritually you already are. This inner movement is what the law responds to. As you lift yourself in consciousness, everything begins to shift. The energy that once tied you to their harm dissolves. The hurt loses its grip. The narrative changes. What once felt like injustice now becomes divine set up the necessary friction that birthed your awakening. You were never meant to stay in that chapter. Their mistreatment was simply the pressure that pushed you to rewrite the story. And now, as you walk in this new understanding, you see clearly they didn't break you, they revealed you, they didn't win, they exposed what was never yours to keep, and while they remained asleep, unaware of the law at work, you awakened. That's the real victory, not that they will one day suffer, but that you no longer do. Their regret will come not because you punished them, but because they punished themselves by the life they chose. A life of low assumptions, a life of blame and ego, a life rooted in control rather than compassion. The law will press upon them what they gave, not out of wrath, but out of divine symmetry. What they thought they could do to you and walk away from, they will now walk into in their own world. And as they experience this mirrored reality, they will think of you. They will remember what they did, the coldness, the disregard, the manipulation, and in the silence of their own consequences, regret will be their only companion. And you won't need to say a word, because your life healed, elevated, favored will speak for you. This is the gift of the law. It allows you to let go without losing. It empowers you to stay silent without becoming passive. Because silence is not weakness, not when it's backed by spiritual understanding. You know now that you don't have to explain who you are. You just have to embody it. And as you continue to move forward, you'll begin to feel the shift. You'll notice doors opening without effort. You'll sense new connections forming that carry no drama, no confusion, no betrayal. Why? Because your assumptions have changed. You no longer expect pain, you expect peace. You no longer assume loss, you assume abundance. And because the law reflects your inner world, your new world begins to align with those expectations. That's how the scales are balanced. Not by waiting for their fall, but by rising so high, their fall no longer affects you. You leave the courtroom of judgment and step into the temple of imagination. You hold the vision of yourself blessed, grounded, thriving, and because of this, you begin to attract everything that matches that vision. No bitterness, no revenge, just blessings, and while they carry the weight of their choices, you carry the favor of your alignment. That is power, that is healing. That is the silent reordering of justice, and it is happening even now. So, do not be discouraged by what they did. Do not feel the need to revisit the pain. Instead, revisit the truth. They did not hurt the true you, they only bruised the old story you were ready to outgrow. And the law, being faithful, used that pain to propel you into your becoming. What they meant for harm, the law transformed into good. And now you're free, not because they apologized, but because you transcended. You elevated your assumptions, you realigned your spirit, and the law responded accordingly. Let them wonder, let them regret, let them see the blessing you've become, but let your focus remain within. Because the real battle was never external, it was always about what you believed. And now that your beliefs are whole, strong, and divinely aligned, your world must follow. You won't say a word, you don't need to. Because the law of consciousness is already speaking, it is balancing, it is restoring, and it will never fail. There is a point in your journey where you come to realize that silence is not emptiness, it is mastery. You no longer speak to defend your worth, explain your pain, or prove your growth. You understand that the deepest power you can ever possess is the ability to rise without announcing it. Silence becomes your shield, your sword, your sanctuary. While others waste energy in gossip, noise, and chaos, you conserve yours in stillness and sacred knowing. This is not passive silence, it is purposeful. It is the stillness of a soul that has touched the divine, seen the truth, and chosen to embody power without needing recognition. When they hurt you, they expected you to respond. When they betrayed you, they expected rage. When they dismissed you, they expected your collapse. But you gave them none of it, not because you were weak, but because you were wise. Because the one who knows their value doesn't argue with those who don't. In this silence, something profound happens. You begin to detach from the story others try to trap you in. You stop rehearsing the pain, stop replaying the conversations, stop imagining the confrontations. You realize that your healing is not found in being heard by them. It is found in listening to yourself. And when you go inward, past the noise of ego and emotion, you begin to hear the voice of the Spirit whispering truth. You were always enough. You were always loved. You were always seen by the one who matters most. And once you've heard that voice, the voice of your critics loses its power. Their words become echoes, irrelevant and small, because you've tuned your soul to a higher frequency. Silence then becomes a sign that you've left their dimension. You've exited their world of conflict and entered your own world of clarity. You don't need to win the argument. You've already won the inner peace. The elevated soul knows that not every battle is worth fighting. Not every insult requires a response. Not every lie deserves correction. Some things are simply beneath the energy of someone who has awakened. And once you have seen your own light, truly seen it, you refuse to dim it by engaging with darkness. They will try to provoke you, misunderstand you, even accuse you of being distant, cold, or arrogant. But that's because your silence threatens them. It mirrors back their own noise. It reflects their chaos. And most of all, it reveals their irrelevance in your current season. They can no longer reach you because you're no longer standing on the same emotional ground. You've gone higher, and from that altitude you see everything differently. What once hurt you now teaches you. What once enraged you now amuses you. What once held you now releases you, because silence has given you vision. There is wisdom in restraint, there is glory in patience. The universe itself operates in silence. Stars are born in silence, seasons change in silence, even the soul grows in silence. Why, then, would you think that your power lies in noise? The greatest changes in your life will not be announced. They will happen quietly, in the secret chambers of your imagination, where you've dared to see yourself as healed, whole, chosen, unstoppable. And as you live from that vision, your reality begins to catch up. Those who hurt you, those who misjudged you, those who dismissed you, they will feel the weight of your silence. They will see your life unfolding in ways they never imagined. And their regret will speak louder than anything you could have said, but you won't gloat, you won't mock, you won't even mention their names, because your focus is not on making them see, it's on seeing yourself as God sees you. You've learned to protect your peace like royalty guards the throne. Not everyone deserves access to your energy. Not everyone has earned the right to hear your story. Silence becomes your boundary. It becomes your answer to every question that does not deserve a response. It becomes your refusal to explain yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you from the start. When you stop explaining, you reclaim your power. When you stop responding, you reclaim your focus. And when you stop defending yourself, you step fully into your divine identity. There is nothing louder than a soul at peace, nothing more disruptive to the enemy's plan than a person who refuses to be moved by drama, and nothing more divine than a soul who trusts that God is their vindicator. You no longer crave validation because you've validated yourself. You no longer chase closure because you've become the closure. You no longer seek justice through confrontation because you trust divine timing, and this trust allows you to walk through betrayal without bitterness, through loss without collapse, through injustice without vengeance. The world will look at you and wonder how you've survived, how you've thrived, how you've risen, and they'll expect a dramatic tale, a long explanation, a detailed report of your pain, but you'll give them none. You'll simply smile, nod, and keep moving, because the truth is too deep for words, the growth is too sacred for public display. You've outgrown the need to be understood. You've stepped into the realm of being unshakable. Let them talk, let them wonder, let them sit with their guilt, their assumptions, their misjudgments. That's not your concern. You're too focused on becoming, too committed to inner expansion, too aware of your divine assignment to be derailed by shadows from the past. You bless them with your absence, you heal them with your silence, you teach them with your elevation, and all the while you speak nothing, because those who are truly powerful don't announce their rise. They just rise. And when they see you elevated, graceful, at peace, they'll remember what they did. They'll remember the moment they chose ego over empathy, pride over apology, betrayal over love, and in that memory they'll feel the consequence. Not because you made them, but because silence became their mirror. You are no longer the person they hurt. That version of you died in the fire, and what emerged is untouchable. You are the phoenix they never expected. The miracle they tried to break, and your silence, more than anything else, proves just how far you've come. So continue walking in quiet power, continue creating in sacred spaces, continue evolving without needing applause. The ones who tried to bury you will watch as you bloom, without explanation, without announcement, without a single word, because silence is the language of the elevated soul, and you, beloved, have mastered it. There is something haunting about the realization that the person you once hurt, dismissed, or overlooked has become someone you can no longer access. And this is exactly what begins to stir in the hearts of those who wronged you. They remember you in your lowest form, broken, confused, reaching out for answers, desperate for clarity, trying to make sense of betrayal. That is the version of you they recall, the version they thought would never rise, the version they left behind, assuming you would stay there. In their mind, you are still frozen in that painful moment, still shattered, still wounded, still seeking them. But that version of you, it no longer exists. You have moved, you have transformed, you have evolved beyond recognition. And the distance between who you were then and who you are now is so vast, so profound, that when they finally look for you again, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, they are met with absence, a silence that echoes not rejection, but revelation. You are no longer there. They thought you were waiting, they thought you were stuck, they thought your identity was wrapped in the experience they gave you, but what they didn't know is that while they walked away, you went within. You didn't collapse, you rebuilt, you didn't chase closure, you created completion within yourself. In the stillness of heartbreak, you began the sacred work of reinvention. You stopped asking, why did they do this, and started declaring, who am I becoming because of this? You detached not just from their presence, but from the illusion that they held any power over your destiny, and in that detachment you found your truest self, the one not defined by rejection, the one not confined by trauma, the one who is now unstoppable, not because you sought revenge, but because you sought restoration. Your silence confused them, your lack of response unsettled them. They expected a reaction, a plea, a breakdown. But instead they saw your absence, your stillness, and it scared them more than any confrontation ever could. Because the moment you stopped giving them your energy, your attention, your words, they lost access. And that loss triggered a deeper realization. They didn't just lose a person, they lost a portal to grace. You were not just someone in their life. You were a presence, a gift, a divine mirror, but they only saw your humanity, your weakness, your flaws, your vulnerabilities. They couldn't perceive the light you carried because they were blinded by ego. So they mishandled you, and in doing so, they activated the very law that ensures whatever is mishandled must be removed. You didn't have to slam the door, you didn't have to make a scene, you simply outgrew the room, your healing took you higher, your vision became clearer, and your soul whispered a command that changed everything. It's time to go. You didn't need them to validate your exit. You didn't need permission to evolve. You left energetically, long before you walked away physically, and because of that, they didn't even notice your absence at first. But now they feel it. The space you used to fill is now empty. The light you once brought is now missing, and in the hollowness of that realization, regret begins to form, but they don't know how to reach you anymore, not because you're bitter, but because you've built boundaries. Not walls of anger, but gates of discernment. You no longer entertain energies that drain you. You no longer revisit places where your soul wasn't honored. And so, even if they try to return, even if they offer apologies, even if they finally see you, the timing has changed. You've ascended to a version of yourself they were never prepared to meet. You don't hold grudges, you hold wisdom, you don't carry resentment, you carry revelation. You understand now that they weren't the villain, they were the lesson. A divine catalyst for your awakening, and for that, you don't need to hate them. You simply release them with peace, with clarity, with a heart unburdened by what could have been, and that, above all else, is what stings the most for them. You didn't just walk away, you didn't just stop speaking, you didn't just disappear. You healed in silence, you grew in secret, you flourished in spaces they will never be invited into, and you did it all without announcing it. Without proving anything, without needing them to notice, but they did notice eventually. They began to sense the shift, feel the gap, recognize the transformation, and when they reached for you, what they found was distance. Not punishment, not pettiness, just growth, and growth, by its very nature, always leaves behind what no longer fits. They see you now, thriving, radiant, at peace, and they wonder how. How did the person they hurt become so strong? How did the one they underestimated become so visible? How did the one they tried to break become so whole? And the answer is simple, because God doesn't leave the faithful forsaken, because inner work is louder than outer noise. Because when you align with your divine identity, no weapon, emotional, spiritual, or relational, can prosper against you. What they meant for harm, heaven used for good. What they discarded, the divine elevated. What they abandoned, God restored. You didn't need to get revenge. Your rising was revenge enough. You didn't need to expose them. Your light exposed everything. You didn't need to respond. Your new life became the only response required. And now, as you walk in this new realm of clarity, they are left to wrestle with the shadow of their choices. They may never tell you, they may never admit it, but their soul feels the weight of what they lost. Not just a relationship, but a divine encounter, a connection that could have been sacred, but was treated as common, and that realization becomes their private punishment. You, on the other hand, are free. Free from the past, free from the cycle, free from the need to be understood by people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Your peace is not performative, it is permanent. Your growth is not for show, it is sacred. And your silence, it is not distance, it is declaration, a proclamation to the universe that you now know your worth, that you now walk in purpose, that you are no longer available for anything less than divine alignment. So let them see you, let them wonder, let them realize that the version of you they once knew is no longer accessible, not because you're hiding, but because you're healed, and healed people don't live in old memories. They don't haunt old spaces, they don't dance with old demons, they rise, they soar, they shine, and they do it all without saying a word, because elevation speaks for itself. And when they see where you are now, when they realize you're no longer where they left you, they will regret. Not because you forced them to, but because your absence is the loudest truth of all. There is a mysterious but unfailing justice at work in the lives of those who walk with God, not a justice born out of revenge, but one rooted in divine order. You never had to defend yourself, argue your worth, or expose the ones who hurt you. You didn't need to retaliate when they mocked your softness, mistook your silence for weakness, or betrayed the very loyalty you offered without condition. Instead, you chose the higher path, the way of inward transformation. You turned away from reaction and stepped into reflection. While they were focused on the drama they created, you were focused on the destiny you were cultivating. And now, without effort, without vengeance, without needing to speak their name, you are reaping elevation. Not because they failed, but because you refused to fold. You stayed planted in faith when everything in your world felt shaken. You didn't collapse under the pressure, you used it to press deeper into the truth of who you are. And now, as your life begins to bloom, as doors begin to open, as peace wraps itself around your daily existence, those who hurt you are reaping something too, not punishment, but reflection. They see you rising. They see your energy glowing. They see that what they tried to diminish has only multiplied. But the difference is they no longer have access to it, and that realization becomes its own consequence. The reflection of your strength shows them their weakness. The reflection of your peace confronts their chaos. The reflection of your integrity unmasks their dishonor. This is not about gloating. It is not about superiority. It is about spiritual balance. When you rise without hate, without manipulation, without deception, you invite a higher law to fight on your behalf, and this law doesn't shout. It doesn't seek applause. It simply mirrors to each person what they themselves have sown. While you were sowing in tears, they were sowing in pride. While you were investing in growth, they were busy gossiping and doubting you. While you were visualizing a better version of your life, they were fixated on why you didn't deserve it. And now the law has brought the harvest. Your elevation isn't just material, it's spiritual, emotional, energetic. You don't react like you used to. You don't seek validation like you once did. You don't tolerate what used to drain you. That's growth. That's power. That's the reward of choosing to become rather than to blame. And while they are stuck wondering why their life feels heavier, why peace seems elusive, why relationships are falling apart, they are being shown a mirror. A divine mirror that says, look at how you treated those who loved you. Look at what you ignored. Look at what you took for granted. And that mirror, it's not cruel, it's sacred. It gives them a chance to see, to feel, to recognize what their actions created. not just in your life, but in theirs. Meanwhile, you're soaring. You're no longer entangled in their energy. You're no longer waiting for apologies that may never come. You're no longer explaining your pain to people who never cared to listen. You've transcended the entire vibration of the past. You're living proof that God doesn't just restore, he elevates. He takes what was meant to destroy you and turns it into the very foundation you now stand on. You didn't force anyone to respect you, your evolution demanded it. You didn't beg to be seen, your presence now speaks louder than any words ever could. And the people who once couldn't make time for you are now consumed by thoughts of you. Not because you chased them, but because the version of you they lost is the version they can never meet again. You have become a living testimony of what happens when you surrender the need for revenge and embrace the process of refinement. You let the fire purify you, not poison you. You allowed the hurt to stretch you instead of shrink you. You stayed quiet when your ego wanted to scream. You prayed when your flesh wanted to curse. And now God has set a table for you in the presence of those who doubted you. But even now your eyes are not on them. You're not feasting to be seen. You're feasting because you were hungry for something deeper, something eternal, something real. You're not concerned with who regrets. You're focused on who you're becoming. But make no mistake, they feel it. They feel the weight of your absence, the emptiness where your energy once stood, the silence where your compassion once flowed. They thought you were replaceable, but they've found nothing that compares to your spirit, your sincerity, your light. And so, while you reap peace, they reap memory. While you reap joy, they reap regret. While you walk in divine favor, they walk in divine reflection. The universe isn't punishing them, it's revealing them, and it's doing it through you, because your elevation didn't just bless you, it revealed everything around you. It showed you who was genuine and who was performative, who was seasonal and who was spiritual, who loved your soul and who only loved your benefits. And now that you see it all clearly, you're no longer tempted to go back. You've lost the appetite for places that couldn't hold your becoming. You've lost the need to make yourself small so others could feel big. You're done begging to be understood. You are busy building a life so beautiful, so purposeful, so filled with God's presence that words are unnecessary. Let them reap what they sowed, not out of your wrath, but out of universal law. Let them reflect on what they lost, not because you need them to suffer, but because you've discovered the joy of detachment. And let your life speak every healed piece of it. Let your success be silent. Let your peace be loud. Let your boundaries be your new language. You don't owe them a conversation. You don't owe them access. You owe yourself the freedom to live without looking back. This is the mystery of divine justice. You don't need to curse your enemies. Your obedience becomes your answer. Your evolution becomes their lesson. And your silence becomes their teacher. You are no longer asking, why did they do this to me? Instead, you're declaring, look at what God has done through me. And that declaration is not spoken, it is lived. It is felt, it is witnessed. So continue to rise, continue to bloom, continue to walk in the fullness of who you are. And know this, those who hurt you may never say it out loud, but their soul knows what they lost. And you won't say a word because you're too busy reaping elevation while they reap reflection.